Story 1. The Entitled Lady at Starbucks. A woman with an inflated ego decided that using mobile orders was unfair and demanded that I wait in line, even though my drink was already paid for and ready. I'm 28. There's a Starbucks conveniently located near my therapist's office, and over the past few months, I've gotten into the habit of grabbing a sugary drink before each session. Don't judge me. I know those 400-calorie whipped cream-topped sugar bombs aren't real coffee, but that overpriced $10 liquid dessert is my small comfort before diving into emotional self-improvement. Yesterday morning, on my way to therapy, I made a rare, smart decision. I ordered ahead through the app to avoid the lunchtime rush. Perfect timing. 10 minutes later, I walked in just as the barista was finishing my pumpkin spice cold brew. She called my name, and I happily stepped forward to grab it. But before I could pick it up, a manicured hand gently landed on my forearm. The hand belonged to a woman who looked about 35, polished, confident, wrapped in a flawless linen suit. Her sleek ponytail, gold jewelry, and designer bag practically scream, "I'm important." She exuded that unmistakable aura of superiority, chin slightly raised, posture perfect, as if she believed the air around her was more refined than everyone else's. For simplicity, let's call her Miss Entitlement. Her smile looked polite, but her tone was sugary sweet and condescending, like a teacher correcting a clueless child. "That's not yours," she said softly. I frowned, confused. I checked the cup. My name was written right there. "Oh, sorry. Do you have the same name? I think this one's mine. What did you order?" She shook her head, the smile tightening. "No, my name's much longer than that. I ordered a hot soy matcha with 2 pumps of vanilla." "Ah, then this definitely isn't yours. This one's a pumpkin spice cold brew. Maybe yours is still coming out. You could ask the barista." I reached for my cup again, but her manicured claws tightened around my arm. Her mask slipped, and that fake smile cracked. "You didn't say it was mine," she snapped. "I said it's not yours. I saw you walk in and grab the first drink you saw. You can't do that. You need to wait in line like everyone else." It finally clicked. "Oh, I ordered through the app. It's prepaid and ready for pickup. See?" I pulled up my confirmation email on my phone and showed her. "Order placed 12 minutes ago, paid in full." She barely glanced at it before smacking my hand away, hard enough to leave a red mark. "You can't just walk in and take it," she hissed. "I don't care if it's your drink. It's not fair to everyone else who's waiting." I stood there, stunned. Did this stranger seriously just hit me over a Starbucks order? Around us, maybe 8 people were waiting for their drinks, with another dozen still in line. She honestly thought I should wait behind all of them just to satisfy her warped sense of fairness? I locked eyes with the barista, who looked exhausted, the kind of weary look only years of customer service trauma can create. She sighed and approached us cautiously. "Hi, is there a problem here?" Before I could answer, Miss Entitlement jumped in. "Yes, this girl just walked in, grabbed a random drink, and won't wait her turn. Tell her to get back in line." I held up my phone. "That's not true. This is my drink. I ordered it through the app. Here's the confirmation, and the name matches the cup. Look." The barista double-checked my phone, glanced at the label, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, this order is hers. She paid in advance." The entitled woman's jaw tightened. "I don't care if she paid. I've been waiting here like everyone else. She doesn't get special treatment." The barista's tone stayed calm, but firm. Her order came through the mobile system earlier, so it was prepared in order of receipt. "You're welcome to use the app next time to skip the line. But you can't stop other customers from collecting their drinks or use physical force. Please step aside or I'll have to ask you to leave." Miss Entitlement's face flushed crimson. "No, I want my drink and she can wait like everyone else. Make my matcha first. I don't care if hers is done." I sighed. "I'm actually running late for an appointment, so can I just take my drink and go?" Also, she hit me. There's a red mark on my arm. Maybe call security? The barista nodded. "Yeah, I think that's best." Up until that moment, Miss Entitlement hadn't raised her voice. She'd been calmly dripping venom with that infuriatingly patronizing tone, like she thought we'd all eventually come to our senses and realize she was right. But when the barista finally handed me my drink, her composure shattered. Her face twisted with pure rage as she turned on the poor employee. "This is ridiculous. Your system is broken. Do you have any idea who I am? You'll regret this. Get your manager now." And that, my friends, is how I got smacked in the hand by a Starbucks Karen because she doesn't understand how mobile orders work.
I didn't do anything wrong. I paid for my drink, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll sit here and enjoy it. I have every legal right to do so, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. While the demon continued her tantrum, I glanced at the unflappable barista. She blinked heavily, and for a moment I thought she might actually cry. But then I realized this battle-hardened warrior was simply restraining the urge to roll her eyes. She met my gaze and gave a subtle nod toward the door. After years of surviving the front lines of customer service hell, she could handle this herself. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, letting me pass toward the exit. Just as I reached the door, the elegant woman realized her prey was escaping and screeched, "Hey, where do you think you're going? She can't just leave. Someone stop her. I said she has to wait her turn like everyone else." I raised a single finger in her direction and slipped out the back door just as the bell above the entrance jingled. A security guard had arrived. Beelzebub's righteous tirade immediately shifted gears. Now she was shouting that she had every right to be there, that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that she refused to be kicked out. She demanded her money back, a free matcha, and a formal apology right now. Each sentence was punctuated by the sound of her slapping the counter. Her indignant screeching slowly faded behind the closing door as I walked away, holding my well-earned cold brew like a trophy. I like to imagine the guard didn't have to physically throw her out, though honestly, knowing her, she probably regained her composure, lifted her chin, and swept out like an insulted duchess, muttering something about her lawyer. As I sipped that heavenly pumpkin-spiced madness, I pictured a lonely venti soy matcha latte, extra hot, 2 pumps of vanilla, slowly cooling on the counter. And somewhere, a decaffeinated Beelzebub was probably raging in her fancy office. That thought made every sip taste even sweeter. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect so many people that actually read this all the way through. I figured I'd take a minute to answer a few common questions that keep popping up in the comments. Yes, I'm Australian, and yes, this really happened here. About the infamous pumpkin-flavored monstrosity, I fully admit I have the world's worst taste in coffee, but drinking something that tastes like a scented candle has always been a weird little dream of mine. And you know what? Shockingly good. Props to America for that one. To those asking why I didn't stand up for myself, I'm a lover, not a fighter, meaning I literally can't fight. If I tried to punch her, I'd probably hurt my own hand more than her face. Plus, I didn't want to get banned from the only Starbucks I ever go to, or, get charged with assault. Why didn't I call the police? I was already late for therapy, and I didn't want to spend hours giving a statement. She didn't really hit me, more like a slap on the wrist that left a red mark for a while. No bruise, nothing worth reporting. Should I have thrown my drink on her? Absolutely not. I'd rather calmly sip my $9 coffee milkshake in peace. Besides, if I'd made a mess, the poor employees would have had to clean it, not her. Oh, and shout out to the guy who literally made a fake account just to send me a death threat because he didn't like my tone and thinks I'm a stuck-up witch. Honestly, kind of flattering. That's a lot of effort for one hate message. If you're reading this, send me your name and address. I promise I won't forward it to the cops. And finally, to everyone who made it this far, thank you. It's nice knowing someone actually reads this stuff. This was fun to write, but it's now 4 a.m. and I'm about to crash. Let's see what chaos tomorrow brings. Before we move on to the next story, I've got a question for you. What would you do in this situation? Actually, it reminded me of something that happened to me recently. It's kind of similar. I'd ordered a shawarma through an app, got a notification that it was ready, but when I arrived, I had no idea where to pick it up. The girl behind the counter, she was serving someone else, totally silent, and I just stood there, waiting, confused. I finally asked, "Hey, can I pick up my shawarma?" And she just didn't answer. Awkward silence. I waited until she finished with the customer, asked again, and she finally handed it to me. I said, "You could have just said something," and she replied, "Can't you see I'm serving someone?" Like, what? I was new there, didn't know how pickup worked, and she couldn't spare 2 words to clarify? Some people just really hate being mildly helpful. Anyway, what do you think? Was she totally right to ignore me? Or was that just bad customer service? Curious to hear your thoughts, because like in the Starbucks story, sometimes these wait your turn situations aren't as black and white as they seem.
Story 2.
Hi everyone. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented on my first post. Reading your replies really opened my eyes. You all pointed out things I hadn't even considered before. For example, that it never crossed my mind that my mom's relationship with Robert might have started before the divorce. Maybe she only admitted to it after the fact because it was easier that way. No one would suspect a thing once the divorce papers were signed. Honestly, I never even allowed myself to think my mom could cheat. But now, I'm not so sure. Either way, it doesn't matter anymore because she made it clear she doesn't want much to do with me. What really hurts is that I can't see or talk to my younger brother, and I miss him so much. We've always been close, and it breaks my heart that some of you might actually be right, that Robert could be his real dad. I try not to think about it, but once the idea was planted, it's been hard to shake. I've talked to my grandma a lot over the past couple of days. Neither of us knows for sure, but it's definitely changed how we see Mom. I think talking to my dad might clear some things up, but I don't know if he'd even want to go there with me. It's been 4 days since Mom last came over, and we haven't spoken since. She blocked me the same day, and later Grandma told me she blocked her too. That's so ungrateful, especially considering Grandma takes care of me without asking Mom for child support. She doesn't need to, she has her own money. She's doing this out of love, giving up her retirement to raise me. Mom should be grateful, but instead she cuts her off. I'm just filled with so much anger and so many questions I can't answer. I just hope that one day the truth finally comes out. Hi again. This one's going to be long because a lot happened tonight. My dad showed up. Apparently my grandma had reached out to him, but she didn't tell me because she wasn't sure if he'd actually come and didn't want to give me false hope. As soon as he found out Mom was engaged to Robert, he decided to come. And when he arrived, he hugged me and said he was sorry. Honestly, that alone shocked me. Then he sat me and Grandma down and told us everything. He admitted that he and Mom had been falling out of love for a long time, but they stayed together for me. Neither of them wanted to break the family. Then about 3 years ago, he started an affair with a coworker. He said he wanted to confess, but never had the courage. Eventually, Mom found out about it about a year ago, and that's when she filed for divorce. Here's the kicker. Mom told him she'd keep it a secret as long as he stayed away from us. She gave him a whole list of conditions. He had to give her the house outright. She got full custody of me and my brother, though technically he still had visitation rights, but he could only see us if she allowed it. On top of that, she demanded huge child support payments and a large share of the marital property, and he agreed to all of it. The only thing he asked in return was that she never expose his affair to me, because he didn't want me to see him as a cheater and hate him forever. So far, Mom had kept that secret, but the price was that I had no relationship with him. He also apologized for always being a workaholic, saying he never spent enough time with me or built a real bond. But he added that it wasn't only his fault. Mom always wanted more, and to keep up with the lifestyle she demanded, he had to work himself into the ground. He admitted that wasn't an excuse, but he wanted me to understand that the blame wasn't just on him. I guess I get that, but it's still a lot to process. Then he explained why he had broken his promise to her and showed up anyway. In the message my grandma had left him, she had mentioned Robert and asked if Dad knew him. That's what made him rush over immediately. Not only did Dad know Robert, he knew exactly what kind of man Robert was, and he wanted to warn us. Turns out my parents and Robert were all part of the same college group. Mom and Dad were already dating back then, but Robert had always been into her. Right before graduation, when they all went out drinking, Robert confessed his feelings. Mom rejected him since she was with Dad, but she only told Dad about it 2 weeks later, admitting she was confused about her feelings. That led to them taking a break for nearly 2 months. During that time, she even went on a couple of dates, including with Robert. It didn't last, and eventually she got back with Dad. When they reconciled, Dad asked her not to keep contact with Robert because it bothered him. At first, she agreed, but later that same year, he found out she had still been talking to him. It turned into a huge fight, almost breaking them up. Not long after, Robert actually showed up at Dad's place, and they ended up in a physical fight because Robert thought it would somehow impress Mom. Instead, it disgusted her, especially since she'd already made it clear she only wanted to be friends. After that, she cut him off completely. According to Dad, Robert was always unstable and a pretty awful person. After college, he left town and no one heard from him for years. Dad suspects Mom and Robert reconnected a couple of years ago, since she once mentioned hearing he had moved back. He's not sure when they actually started seeing each other again, but the fact that they're engaged now basically proves she cheated too, which means all the divorce conditions she had forced on him technically lose their...
Story 3. My grandma gave me a penthouse for my birthday, but my mom tried to take it away to please her new husband. Hi everyone. 3 days ago, I turned 15, and my grandma gave me the most unbelievable gift. She signed over the deed to her penthouse apartment to me. She doesn't even live there full time. She has a house in the suburbs and only stays in the penthouse when she comes into the city. I was over the moon. It felt like, for the first time in a long while, something good was happening in my life. Because honestly, this last year has been absolute hell. It started when my dad walked out. He'd always been a complete workaholic, barely around, but the divorce still blindsided me. My mom never even told me directly. One day, I just noticed he was gone. Later, I found out he had already filed for divorce almost a year before. By the time I realized what was happening, it was basically over. He didn't even say goodbye to me, just left me one last message: be good. That was it. I haven't seen him since. When the divorce finalized, Mom got the house and full custody of me and my little brother. Dad technically had visitation rights, but he never used them. He just vanished from my life. Then about 2 months ago, Mom dropped another bomb. She'd been dating someone, let's call him Robert, for a few months, and now they were engaged. I barely had time to process that she was even seeing someone before she announced he'd be my stepdad. It felt rushed, forced, and honestly pretty desperate. How do you even know someone well enough in 5 months to marry them? When I finally met him, he seemed distant and cold with me. With my 4-year-old brother, though, completely different. Playful, warm, like he was auditioning for best stepdad ever. At first, I brushed it off as him just being more comfortable with little kids. But a couple of weeks later, Mom sat me down and told me the real reason behind their whirlwind engagement. Robert had been offered a new job in another state. They were moving. And here's the kicker. They planned to take my little brother, but leave me behind with my grandma. When I asked why, Mom basically admitted it was Robert's idea. He wanted my brother because he was still young enough to bond with, but me, at 15, I was too old to ever become his real daughter. Plus, apparently, I'd upset him when I said 5 months wasn't long enough to know someone before marrying them. He decided I was stuck in the past and would never accept him, and my mom agreed. She told me I'd be better off staying with Grandma, that it would be easier. I can't describe the pain I felt in that moment. My dad had already abandoned me, and now my mom was essentially choosing her new husband over me. I love my grandma dearly, and moving in with her wasn't the issue. She's the kindest, most compassionate woman I know. But to hear my own mother say I wasn't wanted,
That crushed me. I told her I didn't want to wait until the move. I wanted to live with Grandma immediately. Within a few days, I'd packed my things and left. Those last couple of days at Mom's house were silent. I didn't speak to her, didn't hug her goodbye. Honestly, I didn't think she deserved it. The only person I said goodbye to was my little brother, because I knew I'd miss him like crazy. Now I'm at Grandma's, and life already feels lighter. She shows me real love, not conditional affection based on what some guy thinks. Even though the commute to school is longer, I don't care. It's worth it. Every night I call my brother to talk before bed. It hurts that I can only reach him through Mom, but I do it anyway, for him. For the first time in months, I feel like I might actually be okay. I don't really talk to my mom anymore. We only speak when it's absolutely necessary. 3 days ago, I had my birthday. But honestly, it wasn't me who organized anything. My grandma secretly put everything together. She found a couple of my close school friends through my Facebook, invited them along with some relatives, and surprised me with a little party at her house. I hadn't expected anything, so it lifted my spirits a bit, especially after how down I'd been ever since Mom sent me to live with Grandma. But after we cut the cake, Grandma announced her gift to me, and I was completely stunned. She told everyone that for now, her lawyer would act as trustee of her apartment, but the moment I turn 18, full ownership will pass to me. It was the best news I'd gotten in ages. I didn't even think of telling it to my mom. Turns out, someone else did. Yesterday, I found out that one of the party guests must have told her. That evening, Mom called me, sounding way too cheerful for someone about to drop a bomb. She said she knew about Grandma's gift, and that after talking with Robert, her husband, they decided he wanted to adopt me.
Story 4. I overheard my girlfriend mercilessly mocking me in front of her best friend, and it was brutal. My girlfriend's name is Jenna. She's 28, and we've been together for just over 2 years. I'm 33, a veterinarian, and we first met at my clinic. She had just moved to the city and brought her dog in for an ear infection. We started talking, and what was supposed to be a 15-minute appointment turned into an hour-long conversation. I had never been so captivated by a woman before. I used to live a typical bachelor lifestyle, thinking I'd probably stay single forever. My life, full of fleeting, casual encounters, was becoming increasingly dull and empty. Jenna is charismatic, with a large circle of friends, and her best friend is a guy named Dylan, whom she's known for years. I trust Jenna, but I'd be lying if I said their friendship didn't bother me. I'm not angry with her over it, and she assured me they've been lifelong friends with no romantic involvement. I'm confident enough in myself to accept their friendship, and even tried to get along with Dylan. He visited our city 3 times. He's a good guy, but it seemed like he didn't particularly like me. Jenna says he's just protective of her, but I think it's more jealousy than actual protection. Jenna had just finished graduate school this spring and was struggling to find work. We've been living together for a year, and I understand she couldn't yet contribute to rent or other expenses. I'm financially stable, so that wasn't an issue, but I didn't want my support to become an excuse for her to avoid seeking employment. I believe everyone needs financial independence, so I made it clear she should start paying half of the expenses once she got a job. On Monday, she messaged me that she had landed a job she really wanted after a tough interview. I was so proud of her that I decided to leave work early without telling her. I bought her favorite alcohol, picked up her favorite Chinese food, and a few weeks ago, I had bought her a necklace she loved in a shop. It had a small shark pendant, and she's obsessed with anything shark-related. I hid it in the basement, planning to surprise her later when she had forgotten about it. When I got home, I went through the side entrance to the basement to grab the necklace. As I climbed the stairs and opened the door, I overheard Jenna on the phone. Normally I wouldn't eavesdrop, but she was laughing until she cried. It sounded so sweet that I decided to wait until she finished the call to surprise her. She was talking to Dylan, which wasn't unusual. They spoke at least once a week. But then I caught what she was laughing about. It took me a few moments to realize she was mocking our intimate life. She said something like, "No, he doesn't even come close to my ex. My ex was at least 8 centimeters bigger, Every time I eat a tiny carrot, I feel sorry for him. It must be traumatizing to be bitten by the same size. It would almost be cute if it weren't so terrible. He has a great body until he takes off his boxers." There was a lot of laughter. Look, I don't care what strangers online think about my size, but what she was laughing at wasn't even true, which made it even more painful. I don't know about her ex, maybe he was huge, but I'm average, plain and simple. Not exceptional, but not a joke either. I've never felt insecure about it. Hearing my girlfriend discuss me with her friend, given my existing doubts about their relationship, was beyond hurtful. She also mocked me for being handsome, but not particularly smart. I'm actually well educated, so that didn't bother me. I know I'm intelligent, good-looking, and smart, with average equipment. After hearing this, I just left. Did I throw the flowers out of my car window? Yes. Did I cry in the parking lot? Yes. I think she either heard the basement door close or saw me drive off, because she quickly started texting me, asking when I'd be back. This happened on Monday, and I haven't brought it up with her since. I'm still processing it. It's painfully awkward, but damn it, I love her. I know I need to talk to her about it, but I don't know how. Any advice on how to start that conversation? I'm deeply hurt and not sure I can forgive her. I also want to add that I'm definitely planning to break up with Jenna. Today, I met 3 friends for a beer and told them what happened. Their advice matched yours. Break up and do it fast. I called my mom and told her everything too. Yes, I told her everything, even though it was embarrassing. We've always been very close, and I wanted to explain everything to her. I had never seen her so angry before. She knew that I had bought a ring for Jenna. I'll post an update once everything is settled, probably tomorrow. Emotionally, I'll be pretty shaken. Once again, thank you to everyone for the comments and support messages. I never expected so many people to take my side. Update. I finally gathered the courage and ended things with Jenna Thursday evening. Honestly, those were some of the most intense few days of my life. From Jenna's perspective, things got pretty messy. Apologies for the long post, but a lot happened. Following advice from friends, my mom, my brother, and many of you, I decided to talk to her in a public place. My reasoning was simple. Someone capable of such cruelty and dishonesty could easily twist the story, claiming I was abusive or any other nonsense. I wanted to believe she wouldn't do that, but after everything, better safe than sorry. I initially considered just packing her things and breaking up without explanation. But after 2 years together, I felt it was better to talk things through calmly and listen to her side, if she had one, even if it wouldn't change my decision to end things. I took her to a wine bar downtown that has small private booths with curtains. Since Monday, Jenna had been acting like an angel, which could mean 3 things. She felt guilty for her cruel behavior, she thought I might overhear her, or she simply noticed my distance and didn't understand why. She dressed up nicely, and I have to admit, she looked incredible despite everything. Jenna was also very affectionate and kept dropping suggestive comments about what she wanted to do with me later, usually my cute little baby carrot. Normally I'd laugh and enjoy it, but given the circumstances, it was hard to hear and stay composed. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say many times, so once we sat down and our wine arrived, I started talking. I don't remember every word because adrenaline was off the charts. I began by telling her how deeply I loved her, how she was the only woman with whom I felt such a profound connection, someone I fully opened up to and trusted. I told her she was the only one I had considered marrying, and the reason I went shopping for a ring. I didn't mention that I had already bought it, or that I had imagined us having children in the coming years. She kept interrupting with phrases like, "Oh, how sweet," or telling me how much she loved me. Then I looked her straight in the eyes and asked her bluntly, if she loved me so much, why did she mock me so terribly in front of Dylan? Her expression gave me a certain satisfaction. As expected, Jenna initially denied everything and pretended not to understand what I meant. She claimed Dylan knew how much she loved me and she never made fun of me in their conversations. I simply looked at her and said something like, "Come on, Jenna." Even after I explained that I came home early Monday and overheard everything, she continued to deny it. Her calmness was irritating. I told her we both knew she was lying,
and what she said was inexcusable. I couldn't understand why she would say such things, especially since she lied just to laugh at me. She kept pretending I was imagining it. She insisted she loved me so much, was never dissatisfied with our intimate life, and would never complain about my size. She claimed she loved me for my intelligence and caring nature. Had I not heard it myself, I might have believed her. She deserves an Oscar for that performance. Some commenters asked if I was sure she was talking about me when discussing her ex and his crackling. She did mention my name, comparing me to him. I am completely sure she was referring to me and lying straight to my face. I told her I would drive her home so she could gather essential items from the house. My brother and his wife were there too. I wanted witnesses to confirm I let her collect her things without being aggressive. I said I'd pack the rest and leave it outside for her to take at her convenience. Jenna was shocked that I was actually ending things. She begged me to reconsider, but my decision was final. It was hard to hold back tears as she expressed how much she wanted to be with me forever and that she had planned to be the mother of my children. She kept asking what she should do now and where she would sleep. I told her that was no longer my problem and that she had plenty of friends she could stay with until she found a place of her own.
She only needed to take her clothes, toiletries, and a few personal items. Almost all furniture and decor in the house, which she had redone, had been paid for by me. And then the tears began. Jenna started crying, saying she couldn't understand how I could treat her this way. She repeated over and over that she always thought I was a good guy. I told her I am a good guy. That's exactly why I didn't throw her things on the lawn, change the locks, or leave without explanation. And then somehow she managed to twist the knife even deeper. She admitted she didn't know why she had said all those things to Dylan. Maybe it was because with him, she could laugh at things that would otherwise make her cry. Apparently, this included my penis. Normally, I don't stoop to sarcastic remarks, but I told her she was welcome to move back to her hometown and live happily with her ex and his 23-centimeter endowment. Seeing her tears vanish instantly was shocking. Clearly, in her eyes, I was a jerk, terrible with women, a failure, destined to be alone with a tiny carrot down there. She said she never really loved me, that she saw me more as a friend and stayed to avoid hurting me. Makes sense, I guess. Then she said that if I ever proposed again, she would call me a loser and a jerk. And just in case I didn't understand, she repeated her little carrot comparison. Oh, and apparently I'm doomed to die alone. I told her that dying alone is better than dying in a marriage with a woman who doesn't love or respect me. No joke. Then she just screamed. A long, unbelievably loud scream. Not even words, just pure noise. It was terrifying. After that, she ran out, calling me a disgusting pig. I had already paid the bill and apologized to the waiter for the drama. When I stepped outside, she was just standing there, crying. Even though what she did and said was awful, it still hurt to see her like that. I didn't want to just leave her outside in the cold, so I offered to drive her home so she could gather her things, but she had to stay somewhere else afterward. She agreed. The car ride was silent, incredibly awkward. When we arrived home, my brother and his wife were there. His wife stayed inside while Jenna collected her belongings, and my brother waited with me outside. The process went relatively smoothly. I left her a note explaining that her things were on the porch and she could collect them anytime I was at work. I didn't hear from Jenna all day until it was time to come home from work. She sent a vicious message wishing me every misfortune imaginable. I didn't respond. When I got home, I found my house in complete chaos. I have no idea if she made a copy of the key or somehow knew how to pick locks, but she got inside and destroyed everything. Breakable items were smashed, furniture ripped apart, and the kitchen was ruined. The only good thing she did was lock my 2 dogs in a room, probably to keep them safe from broken glass or spilled food. I have 2 cars, one for daily use and an SUV for work, which I use for house calls or transporting large or exotic animals. Among all this chaos, I remembered that I had given her the keys to the SUV in case of emergencies. She destroyed that too. Inside, flour was scattered and tomato sauce was spilled everywhere. It's just stuff, I know.
but the most shocking part was that she could act so childish and destructive after everything we'd shared. Just the weekend before, we'd gone to a show, hung out with friends, played Monopoly, made up our own drinking game, watched Netflix, and even had sex multiple times. And now, my home and car were ruined, and I was left in turmoil. In a fit of anger, I immediately ordered 22-kilogram bags of mini carrots delivered to Jenna at her friend's address. 40 kilograms of tiny carrots, within an hour. That evening, I got plenty of angry and insulting messages from her. Yes, it was petty, but I don't regret it. Aside from the wasted food, hopefully she donates or cooks with them. I blocked Jenna. She's truly cruel, and I know I deserve better. Since Monday, I've reflected a lot on myself as a partner and tried to understand what might have caused her to build up resentment or dissatisfaction toward me. To be completely honest, I work hard, I make time for everyone I love, and I try not to bring stress home. Some days at work are just brutal, and today was one of them. I'll admit it. Jen and I had argued about this before, and I genuinely tried to organize my schedule so I could come home at a reasonable hour and leave the stress of work behind. But anyone who's a vet or knows someone in the field understands that we're always on call for emergencies. Sometimes we have patients that need constant monitoring or overnight care. Taking a day off is possible, but it's complicated. I have an incredible team that can handle most situations, yet even on days off or during vacations, I still get calls or messages. I'm sure there were moments when Jenna felt second to my work, and honestly, I know there were. She told me that herself. I tried to adjust, but there is only so much one can do. As far as I remember, I was never intentionally mean or rude to Jenna. Sure, there were bad days when I was irritated or distant, and we had arguments and disagreements, but nothing toxic or abusive. I really believed we had a strong relationship and that we were both happy. I was happy. Still, it's hard not to question yourself and wonder if I really had disappointed her or neglected her to the point that she felt so unloved that she acted out the way she did. I don't know. What I do know is that regardless of any perceived shortcomings on my part, her words and actions were completely unacceptable. I did not deserve any of it, and that's on her. A quick update, I filed a police report and took photos of the wrecked house, hoping it will help cover at least some of the damages under insurance. Honestly, I don't expect much from the police since I can't prove it was Jenna. And frankly, I don't want to see her again. I just hope the insurance covers the damages and I'll move forward with my life.
Story 5.
They want us to follow a dress code at school? Nope. I'll wear whatever I want. A little background for context. I've never been a fan of dress codes just for the sake of having them. So when I got into a boarding school that didn't require uniforms, I was thrilled. Honestly, I don't even hate dress codes in principle. My problem is always with how people interpret them. For example, if the rules say socks should be black or blue, 99.9% of people will assume it means navy blue. I'm the kind of person who'll show up in sky blue socks just to prove a point. Not to make trouble, but simply to share a sly grin with the handful of people who think, well, it does just say blue. It's my way of reminding the bureaucrats who wrote the rules that they aren't as airtight as they think. As my husband likes to say, I've always been a bit of a pain in the neck. I enjoy showing that either or isn't the only option. I've always dressed boldly, loved unusual combinations of fabrics and colors, and if someone had encouraged me to learn sewing back then, I probably would have become a fashion designer. But boarding school is hardly a place full of vibrant creativity. Despite being spirited, I was never a troublemaker. My mom used to describe me as a polite, well-behaved kid who could bend rules into a pretzel without ever technically breaking them. She had to word her rules very carefully whenever she left me home alone, but she also had to be cautious not to give me new ideas in the process. If someone presented a rule as unbreakable, I just had to test it. And if they were pushy or smug about it, I'd find the cleverest way possible to prove them wrong.
My mom always believed critical thinking was the real key to success in life. She taught me that if you can analyze a problem and figure out a solution, you don't need to have all the answers memorized. You just need to know how to find them. Remember, this was a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't fault modern parents for having a different mindset. Still, I'd raise my own kids with the same philosophy if I had them. She raised me to believe success comes to people who don't just answer apple when someone asks what that round red thing on the table is. Instead, you pick it up, study its weight and texture, notice the sheen on its wax, memorize its smell, because you never know when someone will ask you to describe the underside of an apple when there isn't one around. And when you grow up thinking that way, turning school dress codes inside out becomes kind of fun. So here's the actual story. At my boarding school, we had 2 dress codes. The first was called the class dress code, and that basically meant we were expected to look like young professionals. Pretty standard stuff. Skirts below fingertip length for girls, shirts and ties for boys, and all the usual details. The second set was for downtime, called city dress. That was when we hung out in the student lounge or went off campus. It was more relaxed, but still had enough restrictions to prevent the girls from wearing anything too revealing, or the boys from dressing like slobs in ripped clothes. Now, I had these suede knee-high fringe boots. Actually, I had 2 pairs, one black and one brown. They were the warmest, most comfortable boots I'd ever owned, even before Uggs became a thing. My mom and I had fought over those boots for years, so it was a huge personal victory when she let me bring them to school. One day, a teacher pulled me aside and told me that the faculty had been discussing my boots and decided they didn't fit the class dress code. But I read the rules, I argued. There's nothing in there about boots like these. I know, she admitted. But we've decided they don't fit the image we want. But the color matches, I know. The material's fine too. Suede is allowed. Yes. The rules don't mention height. Riding boots are permitted, right? That's true. So why then? I demanded. I honestly can't tell if I felt more angry or hurt. Probably both. This teacher was someone I respected, someone who had always been kind to me, and I immediately understood why they sent her to talk to me instead of someone else. Because I wasn't the type to throw a tantrum or cause a scene. I was the type to plan my revenge quietly. All right then, I said calmly, and walked away. That night, I studied the dress code rules word for word, line by line. I read through every single sentence of that dress code over and over again. I even said the rules out loud, picked up every item of clothing listed, and examined it like I was some alien who only had this manual and a piece of fabric to figure out why humans wear these things. I had to admit, it was a strict code, but they made 2 big mistakes. First, nowhere did it say where each piece of clothing had to be worn. Second, there was no mention that you even had to look presentable. The rules only specified colors and lengths. Skirts below fingertip length, socks above the ankle, sleeves covering elbows, and so on. Shoes had to be in muted tones, black, brown, or other earthy shades, like my fringe boots. But nowhere did it say you couldn't show up in, say, elf shoes. Of course, elf shoes wouldn't exactly scream professional, but still, loophole. I went to bed that night mad as hell, my head buzzing with mischievous ideas. I debated with myself for a long time whether I should even go through with it, but eventually I decided if I still felt the same way in the morning, I'd start phase 1. The next day, I woke up just as annoyed, and on my way to breakfast, I mentally made a list of the biggest clowns in my class. In the cafeteria, I found a couple of them and told them, "You know, the handbook is very specific about how ties must be knotted. Windsor, single, or double. And if it's a bow tie, it has to be tied in the classic way. But nowhere does it say ties have to be worn on the neck. The rule just says they must be properly tied." I suggested that they read it carefully that evening and decide for themselves what to do with that little loophole. The following day,
Ties were everywhere, on wrists, wrapped around glasses, tied across foreheads, looped around ankles, knees, thighs, even wrapped around fists like someone was stopping a nosebleed. If you could tie a Windsor knot on some body part, one of the boys in our school had done it. I was ridiculously proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were irritated, of course, though plenty of students found it hilarious, until math class. One boy came in without a visible tie. He was the one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher looked down at him sternly and said, "I know you all decided to play games with ties today. I think we've been patient enough, but you do know the rules say you have to be wearing one." He grinned, looked her in the eye, and replied, "I am wearing one. You just can't see it." The room erupted in laughter. Maybe he did tie it around his ankle under his pants or around his elbow under the blazer. Who knows? But to the rest of us, he instantly became the guy who wore his tie on his junk. By the end of the day, I was considered the legend who would sound a loophole, and he was the legend who took it to, well, the most infamous possible place. The very next morning, the school email newsletter had an announcement. The rules had been updated. Ties must now be worn on the neck only. Fun times were officially over. But phase 2, oh, that was the real challenge. I'd been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I'd ever seen at the mall. They were silver, with holographic rainbow circles all over, had a 5-centimeter platform, a 10-centimeter heel, and lace-up fronts that came just above the ankle. Utterly outrageous. I knew there was no way I could get away with them to class, but for city dress, I wanted them so badly. After 9 years of uniforms, I was finally starting to enjoy fashion. I'd been saving money for months and would sneak into that store whenever I could, just to look at them. For a while I tried to convince myself they were too expensive, but once they banned my favorite suede fringe boots, my desire for those wild rainbow boots only grew stronger. Eventually, I scraped together enough money. It felt like fate. That weekend, I practically skipped to the mall, grinning from ear to ear, only to find they were sold out in my size. I nearly burst into tears, but then, right next to them, I saw the same design in black patent leather. Until that moment, I'd dismissed the black pair as boring, especially compared to the silver ones. But here's the thing. Our dress code had an entire paragraph about patent leather shoes. They were allowed, but only if worn with pants. Why? Because of that absurd old belief that shiny shoes could reflect a girl's underwear if she wore a skirt. So my rainbow boots, absolutely banned. But their black patent leather sisters with silver accents, perfectly legal. Silver detailing was allowed, since shoelace eyelets could be made of metal. And the 5-centimeter platform and 10-centimeter heel, also fine. There wasn't even a height restriction for heels in the dress code. I guess the school assumed no high school girl would willingly spend an entire day in stilettos.
And unlike the shiny rainbow boots, their black patent leather version looked less like party footwear and more like ankle boots a pixie would wear. Funny thing is, I never would have even glanced at those black boots if it weren't for my newly discovered obsession with the dress code. The outfit started with these bright orange polyester pants, covered in tiny gray-green amorphous specks, something that vaguely resembled a microscopic giraffe print. The green was barely visible. From a distance, it just looked like some random texture over the orange. The clash between the two colors was so aggressive that the pattern literally seemed to vibrate, making you dizzy and even a little nauseous if you stared too long. By sheer luck, I had also managed to grab an orange terry sweater in exactly the same shade. The result? From the waist up, I looked like a rejected Sesame Street character, while from the waist down, I resembled a disco-era misfit. Did I mention the pants were slightly flared? So on Monday, I walked into class looking like someone who'd been thrown off the set of Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had these heavy wooden heels that clumped so loudly they echoed through the entire building. Suddenly I was towering a good 10 centimeters over everyone else, more noticeable in the hallways, and even rivaling some teachers in terms of sheer presence. I caught a few of them throwing sideways glances at my boots, and I started keeping mental notes on which staff members apparently had it out for my suede knee-highs. It was obvious who found my appearance ridiculous. But I didn't stop there. It turned into a personal mission to curate the most hideous outfits my imagination could come up with. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I just wanted to make sure every piece still technically complied with the dress code. Even the teachers admitted my boots met the written requirements, they just didn't like them. I'd put effort into following their rules, and suddenly it wasn't good enough, simply because my choices weren't to their taste. So fine, if they didn't like my boots, I'd wear ugly boots every single day, forcing them to stare at outfits that nobody in their right mind would find appealing. And what could they do? Tell me daily that my clothes were wrong while failing to explain how? By their own admission, nothing I wore actually broke the rules, and I wasn't about to start breaking them. That's not my style. Living in a dorm had its perks. Girls shared clothes freely, so as long as you were willing to lend your stuff too, you essentially had access to 30 wardrobes, just in our block alone. My own clothes had been carefully coordinated, but once you started mixing them with other people's, the results became gloriously absurd. Like when my roommate's loud neon blouse, which she only ever wore with a black skirt, ended up paired with another girl's skirt in a clashing wild print. I wore it specifically because the colors screamed at each other. Still, not against the rules. Those scandalous slut boots, I only ever paired them with pants. I raided every thrift store, vintage shop, and secondhand place in town. And since our city had no shortage of hippies, the selection was fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with ties that made me look so boyish that at a parent-teacher meeting, one of the teachers actually asked my mom if I was... Apparently dressing badly meant you were automatically gay. I'd braid my bangs into a thin plait, clip a heavy earring to the end so it dangled, and then swing it back and forth over my desk or book, but only during the lessons of the teachers I suspected of discriminating against my boots. Basically, I did everything I could to annoy them with my appearance. At that infamous parent-teacher conference, they asked my mom to talk to me about my clothes. She blinked and asked if I was breaking any rules. They explained the boot situation. My mom laughed and told them there was nothing they could do. If there's one thing her daughter hated, it was being punished for a rule she didn't know existed, or worse, one that had never even been written down. If you want to make a new rule right now to stop her, go ahead, Mom said. By tomorrow, she won't be doing this anymore. I promise you won't see those boots again, but the way she'll see it, you've taken away something she liked for no good reason. That's punishment, whether you call it that or not. And when she feels punished unfairly, she punishes back. Simple as that. My advice, drop it, and spend the summer rewriting your handbook. Otherwise, you'll burn through paper trying to keep up with all the loopholes she's going to find. My daughter lives for finding loopholes. Honestly, I regret giving her so many puzzle books when she was little. Hearing this, the teachers admitted the only real reason they were ignoring my new boots was this. When the teachers saw how I reacted to the suede boots ban, some of them honestly seemed afraid to imagine what I might show up in next if they tried to outlaw the second pair as well. But being the well-behaved student that I actually was, I never wore those suede boots again. And after that, no one ever gave me grief about my outfits. Well, except for one time when my skirt ended up way too short. That one wasn't even intentional. The following year, I didn't return to that school, but for completely unrelated reasons, so I never found out if they rewrote any of their rules. To this day, though, I've kept those black boots. They're still tucked away somewhere, and every time I stumble across them at the bottom of a box, I can't help but smile. I even held onto a t-shirt from that era. It is without exaggeration the single ugliest piece of clothing I own, but I just can't throw it out. Every time I see it in my closet, I start laughing, remembering the whole saga. Somewhere I've even got photos of me in that ridiculous fuzzy orange getup. If I ever dig them out, I'll definitely share them. Back then, I was having the time of my life breaking their so-called dress code, and it felt amazing. So, here's the takeaway. Whatever problems you're facing, try flipping them inside out. Look at them from a different angle, twist them around, play with them. You never know where the cracks might be hiding. And of course, this is also just another wonderful story about how amazing my mom was. She always had my back. Though if I'm honest, I suspect she was also quietly angry that the teachers hated our boots. Because if the school rules had been clearly written, she could have been wearing them all along. Instead, those awesome boots just sat gathering dust in my locker. I miss you, Mom. Edit. No, I didn't end up becoming a lawyer. Life just went in a different direction. These days I work for myself, building a business in a field I'm genuinely passionate about. I enjoy almost every minute of it. I'm happy and I'm grateful that I get to love what I do. One last note. This whole story took place in the mid-90s.
Story 6.
I stopped a kidnapping while delivering pizza. I work as a pizza delivery driver, and one night turned into one of the strangest and most intense experiences of my life. It was a crazy shift, non-stop orders, driving all over the city without a single real break. I had been drinking water all evening because of the heat, and of course, I didn't make time to use the restroom. By the time I got close to my next delivery, the urge hit me like a truck. Luckily, I was nearly at the customer's address. I thought I'd drop the pizza off quickly, then deal with the problem. But when I pulled up, things immediately felt wrong. I'd been to that neighborhood before, even that house, but this time all the windows were dark, not even the glow of a TV inside. The entire street was eerily quiet. This was a college area, so sure, not many students were around in July, but still, somebody had ordered this pizza. I wasn't about to step out of the car and walk up to a pitch-black house. It was around 9:30 p.m., still hot outside, even though the sun had set hours ago. My car's AC barely worked, and the pizza boxes weren't helping. I called the number on the order. At first, all I heard was heavy, uneven breathing, then a shaky, "Hello?" I tried to keep it professional. "Hey, I'm outside with your pizza, but it doesn't look like anyone's home." The voice gasped, I'm not there. Not yet." Annoyed and very distracted by my full bladder, I snapped back harsher than I should have. "Well, if you're not here, I'll have to cancel the order. You were supposed to pay cash. Next time, plan better." Almost immediately, I regretted it. The voice grew clearer. It was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s. Out of breath, she explained, "Oh my God, I was running home. I almost didn't hear you. I just switched off my AirPods. Is this better? I lost track of time at work, but I knew you'd be coming, so I'm literally sprinting back right now. Please, please don't leave. I'm starving and I don't have a car. Just 5 minutes, I promise." Hearing her voice jogged my memory. I had delivered here before, and she was always polite. Now I felt like a jerk for barking at her. I told her it was fine, that I'd wait, and hung up. But the bathroom situation was reaching emergency levels. No trees, no hidden corners. And like an idiot, I had tossed out an empty bottle earlier. The only option was the row of bushes by her front walkway. No lights outside, no one around, my car parked across the street, and thankfully, my job didn't require a uniform. I figured I'd be quick and no one would notice. I hurried to the thickest bush right near the front door, unzipped, and finally started to relieve myself. But almost immediately, I realized something was off. The sound wasn't right. It wasn't hitting dirt. It was solid. Before I could process it, a muffled male voice barked, "What the hell?" And a man suddenly burst out of the bush. He ran past me, wiping himself off. I must have hit him directly. My eyes adjusted enough to make out his shape, build, and clothes, but he disappeared before I could react. A minute later, I heard the screech of tires down the street. That's when it clicked. That girl had said she was running home, alone, at night, and some guy had been hiding in her bushes by the door. If I hadn't been desperate enough to relieve myself right there, I don't even want to think what might have happened. I was so stunned that I didn't even zip up. I just stood there, frozen, trying to process what the hell had just happened. The reality of it was so terrifying that my brain refused to accept it, desperately searching for some logical explanation that would make it all seem normal. I wondered maybe the bushes led to a backyard and only looked like they were up against the house. Maybe they covered an open basement window or something. But then that voice in my head screamed, "Dude, that guy was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree Fahrenheit. That is not normal. He's bad news. You're in real danger." The thought that I'd been just a couple of steps away from some man hiding in the bushes outside a young woman's home at night sent a chill down my spine. My fight-or-flight response completely broke down because instead of running, my dumb brain decided to do the absolute worst thing possible. I walked closer to investigate. There had to be a reasonable explanation, right?
Some non-creepy reason for a guy in a hoodie to be crouched in the dark shrubs? I circled around, turned on my phone flashlight, and aimed it behind the bushes. But if something looks scary in the dark, trust me, shining a beam of light on it can make it 100 times worse. That's when I saw it. A bag. It was an old, beat-up drawstring backpack, a little damp from, well, yeah, I'd accidentally splashed it. Still in a fog of shock, I reached for it, thinking, okay, maybe this explains it. Maybe he's homeless. Maybe he was just resting here. But when I opened the bag, reality hit me like a truck. Inside were a sharp hunting knife, a roll of duct tape, and a bottle of pills. At that moment, every illusion I'd been clinging to shattered. My body flipped into full survival mode. Adrenaline and instinct kicked in like never before. Gone was the frozen, confused idiot. I became laser-focused on one single goal: get to the car. I dropped the bag like it was on fire, bolted across the street, jumped into my car, and floored it before the door had even shut. I didn't stop until I hit a red light several blocks away. Only then did I pull over in the lot of a 24-hour pharmacy, shaking uncontrollably, trying to catch my breath. When I finally calmed down enough to think clearly, the first question hit me. Do I call the cops first, or the girl who lives there? I mulled it over for what felt like 10 seconds, but when I glanced at the clock, an entire hour had passed. My brain was still scrambled. Eventually, I told myself, all right, I'm safe in my locked car with the engine running. If anything goes down, I can drive away. But she might not know what's waiting for her. So I started dialing her number. Then a horrifying thought stopped me cold. What if there is no girl? Sure, I was 90% sure I'd delivered here before, but what if I was mistaken? What if the girl on the phone was just bait, a setup to lure me into a trap? Every pizza delivery driver alive has heard of the evil genius case. I replayed the phone call in my head. She'd been panting, said she wasn't home, begged me not to leave. The whole thing was weird, way too weird. Nope, can't risk it. Call the cops first. So I dialed 911. The operator was calm, professional, thank God, because by then I was completely falling apart. I kept rambling, tripping over my words, trying to explain 3 different points at once. You have to get there before the girl arrives. He wasn't waiting for me, he was waiting for her. But then again, maybe she doesn't even exist. But I did talk to someone on the phone, so if she is real, you need to find her because she has no idea what's happening. And listen, I only checked part of the bushes. There could be more than one of them. Oh, and you'll know the guy when you see him because, I peed all over him. Not on purpose, just... Long story. Finally, the dispatcher told me to stop talking and just stay on the line. And then, her number popped up on my phone. Incoming call. I couldn't answer without disconnecting 911, so I ignored it. Seconds later, a text came through. Hey, I'm here, but I don't see you. I blurted it out to the operator, and they said the officers were just a couple of minutes away from the address. But my stomach twisted with guilt. Rationally, I knew the odds of her being some kind of scammer were tiny. Much more likely, she was a real girl walking straight into a nightmare. I unmuted the line and said, I'm going back. I can't just sit here. They definitely didn't like that answer, but I had already turned the car around. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and the whole way I was muttering under my breath, shh, fuck, fuck, fuck. And then I saw her.
Story 7. I'm refusing to go on a family vacation because my sister expects me to look after her kids again. I even had to move out of my parents' house earlier because I was constantly being pulled into babysitting my 3 nieces and nephews. Despite that, last year I still ended up acting like a helper, or even the main nanny during our family trip. For example, last summer we went to the beach. My parents paid for my hotel, but I had to share a room with 3 loud boys because my sister and her husband wanted their own space. I was promised I'd have time for myself, but instead I spent almost all my free time taking care of the kids. When I complained, everyone reminded me that I wasn't paying for the trip. In the end, we only did one thing I actually wanted, visiting an art gallery. I enjoy that kind of thing on vacation, but the kids were bored.
This year, my parents planned another similar trip in June and expected everything to be the same. I refused. I told them I would drive separately and pay for my own hotel so I could have my own space. They were surprised and brought up the cost, but I explained that I have a stable job and can afford it. That led to arguments, but I explained my reasons clearly. I want to enjoy a vacation like an adult, not spend it like a babysitter. My parents told my sister, and she immediately called me, yelling that I would ruin everything if I didn't help her with the kids. I finally snapped and reminded her how last year I was dragged into her chaos, barely able to do anything for myself, and even made to feel guilty for wanting something simple like visiting an art gallery. I told her I deserve a proper vacation too. Now she refuses to talk to me, and my parents are still trying to convince me to go along just to avoid conflict. I'm standing my ground, even though the pressure is growing. I understand it won't be easy for them without help, but I don't think I'm wrong for setting boundaries. Let me know what you think. Am I right, or is my sister justified since she has 3 kids to take care of? Update 1. About an hour after I posted, my sister somehow found it. She wasn't just angry at me, she was upset that people in the comments didn't support her. She had a meltdown talking about how hard it is to raise triplets and insisting that I, as someone young and independent, should help her. I didn't change my position, and now I'm expecting a call from my parents since she already reached out to them. Update 2. After work, I can add more details. Things have mostly settled now. My parents saw my post and were shocked by how many people responded. Yes, they were upset that I posted it, but I told them if they had listened to me earlier, it wouldn't have been necessary. I was tired of always being the one expected to sacrifice for family peace. Eventually, my parents confronted my sister. The trip was canceled anyway since nothing had been booked yet, but now they're arguing with her. She blames me, and the kids are disappointed because they won't go to the beach. She even called me during lunch and implied that I don't have my own life, so I should help her. I recorded that conversation and showed it to my parents, which made them even more upset with her. A few days later, they told me they would never force me to babysit again and admitted that last year's situation was unfair. Now they're angry at my sister for saying I should help just because I have no life. Meanwhile, her husband has stepped back from the chaos and spends most of his time at work. Update 3. My parents have apologized, but my sister hasn't yet. At least as of a week ago, she refused. This whole situation basically exposed deeper issues in our family. For context, my parents and sister got used to me helping with her triplets. I lived with my parents until I was 22 to save money during college. I had a scholarship, but staying at home made things easier, and I'm grateful for that. But after graduating, everyone assumed I had unlimited free time. That's when they convinced me to go on that family trip. During that trip, I was responsible for 3 6-year-old boys and even had to share a room with them. They didn't listen to me at all. I even had to call their mom multiple times just to get them to behave. Yet, whenever I wanted to do something for myself, I was treated like the problem. If my plans didn't match the rest of the family, they were ignored. It felt completely unfair. I was part of the family, but my opinion didn't matter. After that trip, I spoke honestly with my parents, and they admitted they were wrong. By the end of the summer, I moved out without telling anyone in advance. I had already secured a good job after an internship, and moving closer to work reduced my commute significantly. My sister was especially unhappy because she lost her regular free babysitter, but she still tried to pressure me into helping. Sometimes I gave in when she offered things like pizza, and it became expected. When my parents suggested another trip to the same place, I immediately recognized it would be the same situation again. If I accepted their offer to pay, I'd be stuck babysitting. So I told them calmly I would go independently and pay for myself. That's when everything escalated. My parents started pleading, and my sister tried to pressure me emotionally, but I refused. After I posted about it, my family initially turned against me. My parents even called me while reading my post. I asked them if anything I wrote was untrue. They tried to say it was exaggerated, but I pointed out specific details that proved otherwise. I told them to look at the comments, even though there were too many to read fully. The number kept growing quickly,
which shocked them and made them reconsider their actions. My sister also tried calling me repeatedly during work. I finally answered at lunch. She complained that my post turned her parents against me. After their argument, my parents canceled the trip. At first, they tried to blame me for it, but later they admitted their mistake. They acknowledged it wasn't fair to treat me like free childcare, especially since I no longer lived with them. They also tried to justify things by reminding me I lived with them for free during college, but I pointed out that wasn't a valid argument. When my sister finally spoke to me, she revealed her mindset clearly, saying I had no life and should spend my weekends helping her because she was too tired to manage everything. She's a stay-at-home mom, her husband earns well, and they live comfortably, but her kids are not my responsibility. She got angry and hung up. I had recorded the call and later showed it to my parents, which made them even more upset with her. A few days later, her husband stepped in and made her apologize. It was clear he hadn't realized the full situation before. He even believed she had been paying me for babysitting after I moved out. In reality, she barely covered anything, sometimes just gave money for pizza. It turned out she hadn't paid me properly for months. When this came up, her husband was furious, and she had to pay me everything she owed from her savings. After that, he apologized to me for not stepping in earlier and said they would hire a proper babysitter from now on.
A few days later, we had a family meeting at my parents' house. Everyone apologized to me again. After that, my parents confirmed that the family vacation was still happening. And yes, I'm still going on my own terms, driving separately and paying for my own hotel room. I made it clear that if my sister even tries to push childcare onto me again, I'll switch hotels. I told her directly, and she promised it wouldn't happen. So, if there's no update a month after the trip, it means everything went fine. Update 4. My sister called me demanding that I delete my posts. She had realized how widely the story had spread and couldn't handle the backlash anymore. She asked if people were still commenting, and I told her honestly, yes, around 10 new comments a day, and most of them are criticizing her. She broke down crying and begged me to take everything down. I refused. I told her those posts are the only reason she can't treat me like garbage anymore. She acted like my entire life should revolve around hers. She didn't even properly pay me for babysitting, kept money for herself, and turned me into a full-time nanny during last year's vacation. It's no surprise people reacted negatively. When I mentioned I had even made a video about the situation, she completely lost it and hung up. Later, my parents called, asking me to delete the posts too. I refused again and explained that none of this would have happened if they had supported me earlier. I told them clearly, I'm not her servant, nanny, or handyman. I'm her brother, and I'm an adult. Eventually, they backed off, but still asked me to remove everything. I told them I wouldn't unless they started standing up for me more often. My sister created this situation with her entitlement, and now she has to deal with it. I also made it clear I have my own life, my career, and I want to move forward. If they keep enabling her, it will only make things worse. The only way to stop this is to end the entire situation. My posts are anonymous, and I have every right to speak about what happened. My mom ended up crying, my dad stayed quiet, and I told them their emotions wouldn't change my decision. They know what needs to be done. Stop supporting her behavior. Soon after, my sister called again,
furious because our parents told her they wouldn't step in anymore and that she had to handle things herself. They also told her to treat me better. I responded sarcastically, and when I hung up, she was crying again. Later, her husband called me to hear my side. He wasn't happy that I kept posting, but after I explained everything, he said he would talk to her again. Hopefully, that would calm things down. The vacation was still planned for the end of June. I had already booked my room on a completely different floor, far from my family. I made it clear, unless it was a planned family activity, I would spend my time however I wanted, visiting galleries, trying local food, and actually enjoying myself. The trip itself had ups and downs. The good part, my parents no longer tried to push me into babysitting. My sister did try, though. She even attempted to find out which room I was staying in, but failed. Before arriving, I had already informed the hotel staff not to give out any information about me. They confirmed it. At the day of departure, I left earlier than everyone else. I knew they wouldn't be ready on time, so I left at 9 a.m., even though check-in was later. My parents were annoyed because they had planned a group breakfast, but I told them I hadn't been informed. At the hotel, I double-checked with the staff about my privacy. Later, I found out my family had indeed tried to get my room number, but the staff refused. My sister tried to pressure them, but her husband stopped her. When we met later, everything seemed normal. At one point during an outing, my sister asked me to watch the kids. I immediately refused. I knew her trick. Just a minute would turn into an hour. Her husband backed me up and told her to stop. She started crying, saying she needed a break, but he reminded her he was tired too. My mom gave me a look, so I went up to her and said clearly if she expected me to babysit, I would leave the vacation immediately. That ended the discussion. After that, neither my mom nor my sister tried again. At the hotel, I avoided sharing elevators and kept distance. My room was far away, and I made sure no one followed me. The next day, I spent most of my time alone, only joining them for specific plans, like visiting the aquarium.
She called us, screaming that we destroyed her family. Her exact words to my husband were, "I worked for years to keep this family together. I forgave everyone for everything they ever did. And this is how you repay me? By letting some bitch tear us apart?" So yeah, that bridge is gone. Ted's coping the best he can. He's in therapy too, working through his guilt and grief. He keeps apologizing, even though I know none of this was his fault. He said that what his best friend and brother did to me will haunt him for a long time. We've been reading some of your comments together. He's thankful for everyone who sees him as someone trying to make amends, but he says he hasn't earned forgiveness yet. He believes it'll take years to truly make things right. He even told me that he'd understand if I wanted a divorce, that he couldn't live with himself knowing what his family did to me. But I told him no, I still love him deeply, and I know he isn't responsible for what happened. We'll see how therapy goes, for both of us. Where's Ash now? He's still under psychiatric supervision. He's asked to see Ted, but Ted refuses. He did send him a letter, though. I don't know what's in it, and I don't want to. Ted assured me that I'll never have to see Ash again. Once doctors deem it safe, he'll be transferred to the West Coast, where the rest of the family can deal with him. Brother number 3 is currently overseeing his condition and agrees it's best to keep him far away from us. Ted still discusses the medical updates with him, but I stay out of it, and that's perfectly fine by me. Following your advice, Ted and I took a break. I quit one of my jobs and switched to remote work for the other. We've been staying at my dad's seaside apartment while Ted's on leave. His boss has been very understanding. It's mid-January now, the gloomy weather, but the ocean view helps calm my mind. Being far from all that madness has been healing. I also changed my phone number so Ted's family can't reach me anymore, and honestly, it's the best decision I've made. It's just me, Ted, and our cat here now. I've filed for a restraining order against Ash. I'm not sure what legal steps brother number 1 is taking for his daughter,
but I know he made her delete her social media accounts. If there are further actions, that's their call. We're moving soon, not sure where yet, but both of us know that our current house no longer feels like home. Over the next few weeks, we'll start looking for a new place closer to my family. As for what was in the locked guest bathroom, sorry to disappoint, but there were no body parts or horror movie scenes. It was just more of the same stuff they'd already found in the main bathroom. I don't think Ash is some serial killer in the making. He's just a severely disturbed man with self-destructive coping mechanisms and deeply unhealthy attachments. One commenter suggested he might have deep-rooted hatred or distorted view of women, and honestly, I agree. All of his disturbing behavior was directed at women, me, his niece, and even his cat, Sunny. But again, I'm not a professional. How am I doing? It depends on the day. Some days are easier, some aren't. I have therapy sessions every other day. And thank you to those who suggested bringing white noise or headphones into the bathroom. It's actually helped a lot. My sisters take turns visiting me, so I'm rarely alone for long. Many of you asked what Ash's childhood was like, what could have caused this. These are Ted's words. When you grow up with 8 older brothers, you become an easy target for criticism, comparisons, and impossible expectations. When the older ones needed somewhere to unload their frustration, Ash was the weakest, the one they picked on. I'm not excusing anything, but there were things even I couldn't protect him from. Now, as an adult, I see how messed up it all was, and so do my brothers. We each have our own demons to fight. We didn't have a supportive family. Everything was swept under the rug instead of being addressed. It left us broken, unable to tell right from wrong. Some of us got better, thanks to our partners, jobs, and experience, but we still have a long way to go. We can't undo the past. All we can do is acknowledge it and try to be better tomorrow. Why didn't anyone check on his cat sooner? Because there was no reason to suspect anything. Sunny was never a very social cat, so during lockdown video call,
Update 3, unique and translated version. Hey everyone, it's been about 2 months since all this chaos started. During that time, I've gotten tons of messages and comments asking for an update, most of them kind and supportive. Of course, there were a few nasty ones too, but at this point, I've made peace with the fact that it's just part of internet culture. First off, sorry it took me so long to write this. I know many of you are curious about what's been happening with Ted's family, but I really needed time to process everything. Anyway, here's another miserable little piece of the puzzle so you can finally get some closure. So, Ted asked me to move out for a while. He's been struggling a lot emotionally and said my presence was only making things harder for him. He's drowning in guilt, and dealing with all those skeletons from his family's closet is too heavy for anyone. We're not officially divorced, but we're not looking for a new place together either. We're still in the process of selling our old house. Ted's living there, and I've been staying with my parents. I honestly don't know what will happen once the house is sold, or what he really wants, but I promised to give him space. He did allow me to post this update, though, because despite some hateful messages, most of you have been incredibly kind and supportive. Now, as promised, here's the updated version of Ted's family tree, including the sisters. Brother number 1, doctor with a military background, married, 3 kids. Brother number 2, surgeon, married, has 2 dogs and a bearded dragon. Brother number 3, engineer, engaged, 1 dog. Brother number 4, teacher and researcher, married, 1 child. Sister number 1, deceased. Brother number 5, works in IT, married, not many details. Brother number 6, doctor, single, open to dating. Brother number 7, chef or businessman, married, 1 kid. Brother number 8, car salesman, married, 3 kids and some fish. Sister number 2 and 3, both deceased. Brother number 9, married, possibly divorced now, 1 cat. Brother number 10, Ash.
Now, about the sisters, I only mentioned them this time because, well, the family story is already insane, and this just adds another layer. I didn't include them earlier because Ted never talks about them. For him, they've simply never existed. All three sisters were born and passed away before Ted was even conceived, so in his mind, he only has brothers. You guys came up with some wild theories, some surprisingly close to the truth, some totally unhinged. But honestly, given what we know about this family, a bit of insanity seems to run in their blood. Anyway, no, the sisters weren't murdered. Sister number 2 and 3 were twins who died shortly after birth due to a developmental defect. Their lungs never fully formed. That's all Ted knows. I don't talk to his family anymore, so I can't confirm more details. Sister number 1 died in a motorcycle accident. One of the brothers was driving, underage and drunk. I didn't mention this before because it wasn't my story to tell. It had nothing to do with my situation, and I still believe people deserve privacy, so I'm not saying which brother it was. Many of you also asked about the dark secrets Ted's mother supposedly forgave her sons for. I'll share only what's been openly discussed before. I won't name which brother did what, except for brother number 7, since I already told his story. So here's what I know. Brothers 1 to 4 were the classic golden boys, smart, athletic, high-achieving. That set the bar ridiculously high for the younger ones. The family expected every child to excel in school, sports, get a scholarship because paying for 10 college educations wasn't realistic, and build a successful career. But brother number 7 wanted none of that. He's a smart guy, but thought it was unfair that his life had to be a constant competition with his siblings. After high school, he told his parents he was going abroad to study culinary arts. His scholarship supposedly covered part of his tuition, but not housing. His parents were thrilled. Their son was going to become a world-famous chef. They agreed to help with expenses, as long as he kept good grades and cooked at family gatherings. In reality, he moved to New York, shared an apartment with 4 roommates, and pretended to live abroad. This was before video calls were common, so it wasn't hard to pull off. He just needed to call his parents at times that matched the time zone difference. He even made up stories for family holidays. His parents sent him money for tuition and rent, but he invested it and eventually made a decent profit. Years later, he returned to the West Coast claiming he was managing restaurants. The truth came out only when one of the nieces said she wanted to apply to the same school and asked him about it. By then, he was already financially stable, so there weren't major consequences. And to be fair, the man can really cook. He still handles Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. Now, for the rest of the family drama, things I learned from Ted, his mom, or the brothers themselves, and for whom none of them were ever punished. Stealing and completely wrecking at least 2 cars, the same brother, both times. Another brother also stole a car. Leaving their grandmother alone for a week, even though they were supposed to care for her. Stealing and selling things from their own home. Fistfights that ended with police involvement. Other fights that didn't involve police but did end with hospital visits. Skipping major school events, stealing trip money, or pocketing class funds. Public nudity, indecent behavior, and urinating in public, apparently a family tradition. One stalking incident that ended with a restraining order. Frequent teenage drinking and underage drunk driving. As for their father, last time I saw him, he was in an urn on his mother's mantle, hopefully still there. In life, he was an awful, misogynistic, abusive husband and father. Somehow, though, he managed to act like a decent grandpa. And before anyone judges, why did you let the kids near him? That's not on me. I don't have children. Ted's siblings do. Ted's parents were, and his mother still is, very traditional. They only ever cared about appearances, the image of a perfect family, with proud sons and beautiful daughters. I'm not excusing them, but losing their daughters really broke them and the whole family dynamic. As for why they had more kids after that, they desperately wanted another girl. They tried twice more, then couldn't have children anymore. I don't know if they would have kept trying or if the infertility made things emotionally worse. As for Ash, I honestly don't know how he's doing. I'd love to say I don't care, but I do a little. Therapy has made me more empathetic, and I can see that he's a sick person. I just hope he gets better, far, far away from me. And that's pretty much everything I can tell you about Ted's family. Big shout out to brother number 6, though. He's been supportive throughout all of this. Still single, by the way, and made me promise to mention that. So if anyone on the West Coast is looking for a kind, attractive doctor from an absolutely bonkers family, here's your chance. As for me, things are still rough. I had to quit my second job after already leaving the first one. So yeah, I'm unemployed and living with my parents right now. But my dad says he doesn't care as long as I'm okay, and I love him for that. I'm still going to therapy. It's the one thing keeping me grounded these days.
Story 8. I am 48 years old. I have known Pat for a very long time. She is about the same age as me. As far back as I can remember, even when we were young, she was obsessed with the dream of having 5 children and living the perfect family life in a house with a white picket fence. In college, I gradually stopped communicating with her. Over time, it became clear that she was a person without principles. She was manipulative, pushy, and constantly tried to make people feel sorry for her. Her behavior often seemed both unpleasant and ridiculous at the same time. I lived my life peacefully and barely thought about her for many years, but one day Pat found me on Facebook. Out of politeness, I accepted her friend request. It turned out that she had become the mother of 5 children and was raising them with a completely permissive parenting style. The kids did whatever they wanted, and she never stopped them. Moreover, she forced her daughters to call me aunt. Pat tried to send her children to my house without warning, constantly called me, tried to occupy all my time, and even began showing up at my workplace. I tried to set boundaries, but she constantly found ways to get around them. My husband and I organized small gatherings for new people in our community. In fact, it was a support initiative. We helped homeless people and those who had found themselves in difficult circumstances. Our community's base was located on a farm that belonged to an elderly couple. There was a large barn, a nice open area, and a green meadow with a small artificial lake. Sometimes weddings were held there. Pat began showing up actively at our gatherings. She never missed an event and tried to take part in all the organizational matters, but her children behaved terribly. During one party, they even ended up in my bedroom, even though there was a separate entertainment area for children. We had to watch them the whole time, so my husband and I couldn't even properly enjoy our own party. A few days later, Pat called me and tried to talk about her children's behavior, but she interrupted me and started talking only about herself. In the end, she announced that her children wanted to come over again and use our pool. I simply stayed silent. Soon afterward, her middle daughter called me and said that her mother had allowed her to spend the entire summer at our house. I had to explain to the child that it wasn't true. Over time, more and more disturbing stories about Pat began to appear. On social media, people complained that she would ask them to watch her children for a couple of hours, but then leave them there for the entire day. Others wrote that she borrowed money and never paid it back. Once, she volunteered to help wrap Christmas gifts for children from low-income families. After that, several nice toys disappeared. Later, they accidentally appeared under her own Christmas tree. There was also an incident at Casey's birthday party. My daughter went there for the celebration,
But in the evening, she called me in tears. She was ignored the entire time because she hadn't brought Casey the expensive gift that Casey had essentially demanded. When I arrived to pick her up, my daughter was sitting alone inside the house while everyone else was having fun outside. Later, the situation became even worse. When my daughter turned 13, I allowed her to wear my grandmother's antique ring. It wasn't expensive, but it had great sentimental value for our family. A few days later, I noticed that my daughter had become quiet and withdrawn. She didn't want to go to school, but she wouldn't explain why. Later, her friend told the truth. Pat's eldest daughter, Casey, asked to try on the ring and simply never returned it. Then she said she had accidentally lost the jewelry. In reality, she wore it to school and even spread rumors that my daughter had supposedly tried to steal the ring. When I learned the truth, I was furious. After school, I approached Pat's car and asked Casey to show me her hand. She tried to hide the ring, but I simply took it off her finger. On the inside, there was an engraving with my grandmother's maiden name. Pat started screaming and claimed that my daughter had given the ring to her daughter herself. Then she said they had actually bought it, but it was obvious that it was a lie. Later, Pat called me and began accusing me of humiliating her daughter and destroying her confidence. I never heard an apology. Her husband, Hank, was a completely different person. He worked several jobs to support the family and always looked exhausted. Pat pressured him, manipulated him, and demanded that he have more children with her. Over time, it became clear that he was in a deep depression. In our community, there was a woman named Lena who organized a program to help brides. She collected donated wedding dresses and gave them to women who couldn't afford to buy a new one. One day, Pat decided to renew her wedding vows with her husband and hold a new wedding ceremony. She literally pushed another couple out of their reserved date at the farm, insisting that her celebration had to take place on that exact day. Then she fell in love with one particular dress that had already been reserved for another bride. Eventually, Pat simply switched the packages and sent that girl a different dress. When she was exposed, she claimed that it was her dress. After that, Lena banned her from even entering the dress storage. But a few weeks before the ceremony, Lena accidentally discovered that Pat had still kept that exact dress for herself. That evening, Lena and I secretly went into the room where it was hanging. Lena took out a pair of scissors and simply cut out the entire back part of the dress. Then she carefully hung it back inside the garment bag. The next morning, Pat called me in hysterics. She was crying and saying her dress was ruined. She even asked to borrow my wedding dress. I refused. In the end, Lena brought her an old, huge, and very strange dress from the storage collection. Pat was furious, but she had no other choice. At the ceremony, she looked absolutely miserable. The dress was far too big, wrinkled, and strange. She kept holding it up with her hand so she wouldn't step on the hem. There were very few guests. People had simply grown tired of her behavior. After that incident, Pat changed a lot. She became quieter and started avoiding everyone. Soon, her husband Hank sought help from a psychologist. Gradually, he began to look much calmer and eventually moved out to live with his parents. After some time, he filed for divorce. Pat slowly distanced herself from our community, removed many acquaintances from her social media, and almost stopped appearing at gatherings. I am 48 years old. I have known Pat for a very long time. She is about the same age as me. As far back as I can remember, even when we were young, she was obsessed with the dream of having 5 children and living the perfect family life in a house with a white picket fence. In college, I gradually stopped communicating with her. Over time, it became clear that she was a person without principles. She was manipulative, pushy, and constantly tried to make people feel sorry for her. Her behavior often seemed both unpleasant and ridiculous at the same time. I lived my life peacefully and barely thought about her for many years, but one day Pat found me on Facebook. Out of politeness, I accepted her friend request. It turned out that she had become the mother of 5 children and was raising them with a completely permissive parenting style. The kids did whatever they wanted, and she never stopped them. Moreover, she forced her daughters to call me aunt. Pat tried to send her children to my house without warning, constantly called me, tried to occupy all my time, and even began showing up at my workplace. I tried to set boundaries, but she constantly found ways to get around them. My husband and I organized small gatherings for new people in our community. In fact, it was a support initiative. We helped homeless people and those who had found themselves in difficult circumstances. Our community's base was located on a farm that belonged to an elderly couple. There was a large barn, a nice open area, and a green meadow with a small artificial lake. Sometimes weddings were held there. Pat began showing up actively at our gatherings. She never missed an event and tried to take part in all the organizational matters, but her children behaved terribly. During one party, they even ended up in my bedroom, even though there was a separate entertainment area for children. We had to watch them the whole time, so my husband and I couldn't even properly enjoy our own party. A few days later, Pat called me and tried to talk about her children's behavior, but she interrupted me and started talking only about herself. In the end, she announced that her children wanted to come over again and use our pool. I simply stayed silent. Soon afterward, her middle daughter called me and said that her mother had allowed her to spend the entire summer at our house. I had to explain to the child that it wasn't true. Over time, more and more disturbing stories about Pat began to appear. On social media, people complained that she would ask them to watch her children for a couple of hours, but then leave them there for the entire day. Others wrote that she borrowed money and never paid it back. Once, she volunteered to help wrap Christmas gifts for children from low-income families. After that, several nice toys disappeared. Later, they accidentally appeared under her own Christmas tree. There was also an incident at Casey's birthday party. My daughter went there for the celebration, but in the evening she called me in tears. She was ignored the entire time because she hadn't brought Casey the expensive gift that Casey had essentially demanded. When I arrived to pick her up, my daughter was sitting alone inside the house while everyone else was having fun outside. Later, the situation became even worse. When my daughter turned 13, I allowed her to wear my grandmother's antique ring. It wasn't expensive, but it had great sentimental value for our family. A few days later, I noticed that my daughter had become quiet and withdrawn. She didn't want to go to school, but she wouldn't explain why. Later, her friend told the truth. Pat's eldest daughter, Casey, asked to try on the ring and simply never returned it. Then she said she had accidentally lost the jewelry. In reality, she wore it to school and even spread rumors that my daughter had supposedly tried to steal the ring. When I learned the truth, I was furious.
Many years ago, my wife's grandfather found an unusual bag of seeds in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri. The discovery was made near Roaring River Park in the southwestern part of the state. The bag was lying on top of a hill and looked remarkably well preserved. Although it had likely been exposed to the elements for a long time, there were no visible signs of damage or stains. The material proved to be strong and flexible. When at rest, the bag looked slightly wrinkled, but it could still be opened and closed. Out of caution, the find was barely touched, limited to just a few photographs. Inside, there were several hundred seeds of at least 2 different species. Such discoveries are extremely rare. Only one similar artifact is known, a bag of seeds kept at the University of Arkansas. It also contains seeds of ancient plants, ancestors of which still grow in this region today. Interestingly, both bags were found approximately 80 kilometers apart. Later, the owners contacted the university and arranged to transfer the find for research. Over time, more details about the artifact's origin came to light. In fact, the bag had been discovered back in the mid-1960s by 2 men, Jerry Weber and Andy Jewell. Andy had worked for many years as a surveyor for the railroad, farmed, and spent most of his life outdoors. After the discovery, the bag was placed in a glass jar where it remained for about 65 years. Over time, some of the information about the circumstances of the find was lost as Andy Jewell passed away in the early 2000s. Later, relatives were able to recover some details. It turned out the bag was not found simply in the open, but on a rock ledge inside a small grotto on the hillside. In the same area, Andy had found other ancient items, stone tools and arrowheads. All of these discoveries were kept together for many years. It is likely that the find site was located in Berry County, near Roaring River Park. Andy lived in the Dry Hollow area between the towns of Cassville and Seligman, and the bag may have been found near the Washburn Prairie. Pinpointing the exact location is difficult now, as most people directly involved in the story have passed away. Gathering all the available information and the old artifacts, the family decided to show the find to experts and brought it to the University of Arkansas Museum. The bag was placed in a special storage room in the museum collection, a controlled environment where archaeological artifacts are preserved. The museum curator, Dr. Mary Suter, carefully laid out the bag, seeds, and stone tools for inspection. After the initial examination, she retrieved a scientific book about woven artifacts found in rock shelters of the Ozark Mountains. As she flipped through the pages, she came across an illustration of a bag that matched almost perfectly in weave, color, and construction with the new find. The news quickly spread among museum staff, and other specialists began arriving in the room. Many noted that such artifacts are extremely rare. Archaeologists explained that rock grottos and natural shelters were often used by the region's ancient inhabitants to store items and supplies. These are precisely the kinds of locations where organic materials, which normally decompose quickly, might sometimes survive. According to preliminary assessments, the bag belongs to the pre-contact period, the time before Europeans arrived in North America. Its exact age is still unknown, but it can be confidently stated that it is at least 500 years old and likely much older. To determine a more precise age, radiocarbon dating will be needed. Since the artifact is linked to the cultural heritage of native peoples, the museum must coordinate with the Osage tribe before conducting research. Afterward, samples can be sent to another university for laboratory analysis. For now, the bag, seeds, and other items remain at the University of Arkansas Museum, where they are being preserved under appropriate conditions and studied by archaeologists. Seed bags like this are considered exceptionally rare finds. Before this discovery, archaeologists knew of only 2 similar bags from Eden Bluff and another heavily damaged one that contained acorns. Organic materials, such as plant fibers and seeds, usually decompose quickly,
so their preservation over hundreds or even thousands of years is highly unusual. Museum specialists immediately began photographing the seeds and stone items to share with other researchers. One of the small black seeds initially puzzled the scientists, but after discussion, they concluded that all of the seeds are very old and no longer viable for germination. Along with the bag, the family also donated several stone tools and arrowheads that Andy Jewell had found. Archaeologist Jared Piard, who specializes in ancient stone implements, quickly determined that these items belong to two different archaeological periods. Some date back to the Middle Archaic period, roughly 2000 to 5000 BCE, and others are from the Woodland Culture period, spanning approximately the first millennium BCE to the first millennium AD. However, these finds can only indirectly help in dating the bag, since it's unclear which of these items were originally found with it. After the preliminary inspection, Dr. Mary Suter decided to show another similar artifact from the museum collection. She led the guests deeper into the storage area, which houses thousands of archaeological artifacts. Among the many shelves with cataloged boxes, she found a collection from excavations conducted in 1932. The box contained various ancient items, shells, bones, fragments of cords, and other objects. Among them was a bag that proved to be almost identical in weave, color, and construction with the new find. It was a little larger, but far more deteriorated. The material was heavily damaged and bound with a piece of leather. Inside, the excavation had uncovered only half of an old carved pipe. Interestingly, this bag was also found in Barry County, Missouri, just a few kilometers from the location where Andy Jewell found his find. Unfortunately, the 1932 artifact has never been radiocarbon dated, so its precise age remains unknown. Next, the researcher showed another famous specimen, the renowned Eden Bluff seed bag. It is approximately 2,000 years old, but is so well preserved that it appears almost new. Examining the museum collection, you could see a vast number of archaeological finds associated with the ancient inhabitants of the Ozarks. The storage houses ceramics, tools, jewelry, and other items that help researchers reconstruct the history of the region. After all the research, the family decided to formally donate the discovered bag to the University of Arkansas Museum. The artifact was formally handed over to the Osage tribe, considered the custodian of many cultural treasures of the region's native peoples. The museum itself is responsible for preserving and scientifically studying such artifacts. The bag was placed in a specialized storage unit with stable temperature and humidity. Under these conditions, the artifact can be preserved for decades and remain accessible for research. The family had long worried whether they could properly preserve such an ancient and valuable item. In the museum, it is now under expert supervision, ensuring not only proper storage conditions, but also continued scientific study. Researchers emphasize that archaeological artifacts are of immense importance for understanding history. That is why, when such items are found, it is recommended to leave them in place and notify specialists who can properly document and study the discovery. The story of this bag ended positively. It is now in a secure location where scientists can study it, and the find will help provide a better understanding of the lives of people who lived in this region centuries ago. In the future, radiocarbon dating of the seeds and a detailed analysis of the bag's material are planned. Once these studies are complete, more will be known about its exact age and origin.
The dog sitter accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets. During our trip, we left our 2 dogs in the care of a dog sitter we found through a specialized pet sitting service. The guy seemed very nice and responsible. Before leaving, we carefully explained all the rules to him. We showed him where the dog food was stored, how exactly to feed the dogs, the proportions for mixing their food, and where all the necessary supplies were kept. In addition,
we left a written instruction sheet with all the details so he wouldn't run into any difficulties. On the morning before our departure, we even fed the dogs together with him so he could see with his own eyes exactly how everything was done. It seemed to us that after such an explanation, it would be almost impossible to make a mistake. Throughout the trip, he stayed in touch with us and occasionally sent messages about how our pets were doing. Because of that, we were confident that everything was going smoothly. But one morning, he texted us saying the dogs were refusing to eat their breakfast. We didn't think much of it, since that sometimes happens when the owners are away from home. When we returned home, the first thing I noticed was the strange appearance of the food in their bowls. Normally, we don't just give them dry kibble. We pour hot water over it, add a bit of goat's milk, and mix in a digestive prebiotic. The result is a mixture that looks like a dark porridge. But this time, something looked completely wrong. It was much darker than usual and had an unusual texture. I asked my husband what that strange mass in the bowls was. Soon it became clear that the problem was much serious. When we went upstairs, we saw that the dogs had vomited on our bed. The sight was very unpleasant, but even worse was realizing that there were strange pieces mixed in with the vomit. That's when we understood what had happened. The dog sitter had accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets meant for a grill, mistaking them for dog food. These pellets were stored in a large bag on the floor in the pantry. The package clearly said grill pellets in large letters. Right next to it was the container with the dog food, which was also clearly labeled. Apparently, on the first night after we left, the dogs ate those pellets. After that, they started feeling unwell, which is why they refused food afterward. Judging by everything, they had gone almost 2 days without eating. We immediately called our veterinarian. Since it was Sunday, the doctor promised to call us back a bit later. In the meantime, we were advised to closely monitor the dog's condition and watch for any new symptoms. At the same time, we contacted a pet poison control hotline. They explained that wood pellets themselves are usually not highly toxic. However, they can cause serious stomach discomfort, digestive problems, or even an intestinal blockage. The situation was complicated by the fact that pellets can be made from different types of wood. Some types of wood can be dangerous for dogs. Among the potentially toxic ones are oak, cherry, plum, prune, horse chestnut, and yew. We checked the composition of our pellets. They contained hickory and maple. In addition, similar blends sometimes include flavorings or even leftover wood from whiskey barrels, which means the composition can be quite varied. That's why we decided not to take any risks and drove to a 24-hour veterinary clinic. Meanwhile, my husband called the dog sitter and told him what had happened. The guy was shocked and began sincerely apologizing. He explained that he hadn't understood exactly where the dog food was and mistakenly used the wrong bag. We also reported the incident to the service through which we had hired him. They opened an official case and said they would conduct an investigation. It also turned out that the platform provides insurance coverage of up to $25,000 for veterinary expenses. At the clinic, the dogs were examined and given x-rays. Fortunately, the veterinarians found no signs of an intestinal blockage. That was a huge relief for us. However, the vets warned us to monitor the dogs carefully over the next few days. It was especially important to watch for any symptoms related to kidney problems, since certain types of wood can cause toxic reactions. Luckily, the next morning things already looked much better. Both dogs ate normally and were able to go to the bathroom. The food stayed down and there were no new episodes of vomiting. It seemed that their bodies had handled the problem. Despite that, the stress we experienced was enormous. What surprised me most was that we specifically showed the dog sitter where the food was and had even fed the dogs together with him before leaving.
That's why it's very hard to understand how he could confuse the dog food container with a large bag of wood pellets. After this incident, we decided to move the pellet bag to a different place so that something like this would never happen again. Fortunately, everything turned out well this time, but the story shows just how important it is to be extremely careful when it comes to the health of our pets.
The dog sitter accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets. During our trip, we left our 2 dogs in the care of a dog sitter we found through a specialized pet sitting service. The guy seemed very nice and responsible. Before leaving, we carefully explained all the rules to him. We showed him where the dog food was stored, how exactly to feed the dogs, the proportions for mixing their food, and where all the necessary supplies were kept. In addition, we left a written instruction sheet with all the details so he wouldn't run into any difficulties. On the morning before our departure, we even fed the dogs together with him so he could see with his own eyes exactly how everything was done. It seemed to us that after such an explanation, it would be almost impossible to make a mistake. Throughout the trip, he stayed in touch with us and occasionally sent messages about how our pets were doing. Because of that, we were confident that everything was going smoothly. But one morning, he texted us saying the dogs were refusing to eat their breakfast. We didn't think much of it, since that sometimes happens when the owners are away from home. When we returned home, the first thing I noticed was the strange appearance of the food in their bowls. Normally, we don't just give them dry kibble. We pour hot water over it, add a bit of goat's milk, and mix in a digestive prebiotic. The result is a mixture that looks like a dark porridge. But this time, something looked completely wrong. It was much darker than usual and had an unusual texture. I asked my husband what that strange mass in the bowls was.
Soon it became clear that the problem was much serious. When we went upstairs, we saw that the dogs had vomited on our bed. The sight was very unpleasant, but even worse was realizing that there were strange pieces mixed in with the vomit. That's when we understood what had happened. The dog sitter had accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets meant for a grill, mistaking them for dog food. These pellets were stored in a large bag on the floor in the pantry. The package clearly said grill pellets in large letters. Right next to it was the container with the dog food, which was also clearly labeled. Apparently, on the first night after we left, the dogs ate those pellets. After that, they started feeling unwell, which is why they refused food afterward. Judging by everything, they had gone almost 2 days without eating. We immediately called our veterinarian. Since it was Sunday, the doctor promised to call us back a bit later. In the meantime, we were advised to closely monitor the dog's condition and watch for any new symptoms. At the same time, we contacted a pet poison control hotline. They explained that wood pellets themselves are usually not highly toxic. However, they can cause serious stomach discomfort, digestive problems, or even an intestinal blockage. The situation was complicated by the fact that pellets can be made from different types of wood. Some types of wood can be dangerous for dogs. Among the potentially toxic ones are oak, cherry, plum, prune, horse chestnut, and yew. We checked the composition of our pellets. They contained hickory and maple. In addition, similar blends sometimes include flavorings or even leftover wood from whiskey barrels, which means the composition can be quite varied. That's why we decided not to take any risks and drove to a 24-hour veterinary clinic. Meanwhile, my husband called the dog sitter and told him what had happened. The guy was shocked and began sincerely apologizing. He explained that he hadn't understood exactly where the dog food was and mistakenly used the wrong bag. We also reported the incident to the service through which we had hired him. They opened an official case and said they would conduct an investigation. It also turned out that the platform provides insurance coverage of up to $25,000 for veterinary expenses. At the clinic, the dogs were examined and given X-rays. Fortunately, the veterinarians found no signs of an intestinal blockage. That was a huge relief for us. However, the vets warned us to monitor the dogs carefully over the next few days. It was especially important to watch for any symptoms related to kidney problems, since certain types of wood can cause toxic reactions. Luckily, the next morning things already looked much better. Both dogs ate normally and were able to go to the bathroom. The food stayed down and there were no new episodes of vomiting. It seemed that their bodies had handled the problem. Despite that, the stress we experienced was enormous. What surprised me most was that we specifically showed the dog sitter where the food was and had even fed the dogs together with him before leaving. That's why it's very hard to understand how he could confuse the dog food container with a large bag of wood pellets. After this incident, we decided to move the pellet bag to a different place so that something like this would never happen again. Fortunately, everything turned out well this time, but the story shows just how important it is to be extremely careful when it comes to the health of our pets.
My boyfriend tried to put my dog to sleep. I'm 23 years old, and I had been dating my boyfriend, Jay, for 3 years. We lived together in a rented apartment, and overall, everything seemed perfectly normal. We didn't have any serious conflicts, which is why what happened came as a complete shock to me. On Friday morning, Jay left for the other side of the country to help his family. That same day, while I was at work, I unexpectedly received a call from my former college roommate, Bob. We used to live together at university, and now he works at a veterinary clinic about 80 kilometers from my home. He asked if I had a dog named Stixie. I immediately became worried and said yes. Then Bob told me that someone had brought a dog that looked very much like mine to their clinic to have it euthanized. He sent me a photo. The dog in the picture was mine. I recognized Stixie instantly. I grew up with him. When I left for university, he was so attached to me that I didn't even consider leaving him at home. He moved with me. Bob decided not to perform the procedure yet and kept the dog with him while trying to figure out what was going on. After work, I immediately drove to him and picked up Stixie. Then Bob showed me something else that completely confirmed what had happened. He had recorded a piece of security camera footage from the veterinary clinic on his phone. In the video, you could clearly see my boyfriend Jay bringing my dog to the clinic. He was even wearing the same clothes he had left the house in that morning before I went to work. When I saw that, I was literally speechless. I couldn't understand why he would do something like that. That day, Jay sent me several messages, just like he usually did when traveling somewhere. He asked how I was doing and whether everything was okay. I replied almost the same way I normally would. But now, every message from him felt completely different. I stared at the screen, trying to understand what he was thinking and what exactly he was trying to hide. I was half in shock and half completely numb. Instead of immediately getting angry, I started going through all possible reasons for his actions in my head. We had sometimes talked about the future. We discussed that in a few years we might move closer to his family in the north or even abroad, but none of that explained why he would decide to get rid of my dog. I was torn between the urge to call him immediately, start a huge argument, throw all his things out of the house, and the desire to stay silent and think everything through first. In the end, I decided not to tell him anything until I figured out what to do next. The first question was practical: how to protect myself and my dog. The apartment we lived in was rented in my name. The lease listed only me, even though Jay paid half of the rent. Because of that, I started looking into whether I could quickly make him move out. My dog, Stixie, was with me at that moment. He's 11 years old. He's gained a bit of weight and moves slower than he did when he was younger, but overall he's healthy. I called a coworker and told her what had happened. She immediately offered to help and even came over to my place so I wouldn't have to be alone. We talked for a long time and discussed the best way to handle things when Jay returned. After that, I started looking into the legal details. It turned out that since only my name was on the lease and we had no written agreements with Jay, he was not officially a tenant. That meant getting him out of the apartment would be much easier than I had originally thought. We decided that when he came back, I wouldn't be alone with him. There would be people in the house to support me. When Jay finally returned, the conversation started with lies. At first, he pretended to be surprised and said he didn't understand where Stixie had gone. He even offered to help look for him. Then he insisted that he knew nothing about anyone taking the dog to a vet to have it euthanized. When he was shown the security footage, he started making up new explanations. First, he claimed that Stixie had supposedly been hit by a car and that he only wanted to end his suffering. But when a living and completely healthy dog was standing right in front of him, that story fell apart too. Then he started getting tangled in his own words and excuses. At one point, the situation became so absurd that he even said, "Maybe I should have put you to sleep instead." After that, any conversation lost all meaning. Together with my coworker and her partner,
I told him that he was no longer welcome in the house and that he needed to take his things and leave. Fortunately, he didn't start a scene and eventually left on his own. I never received any logical explanation for why he tried to get rid of my dog. The only thing left after this whole story was the realization that the person I trusted for 3 years of my life turned out to be nothing like the person I thought he was. And Stixie stayed with me, alive and healthy. Dog.
I ruined my ex-boyfriend's life over 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. When I was in college in the 90s, I met Jake through mutual friends. He was 23 at the time. He had already graduated and was planning to move across the country to pursue graduate school. I was also planning a move, with friends, to a city just an hour and a half away from where he was going. We had a lot in common. We fell in love, and it felt like fate. Both of us planning to move 4,000 kilometers, and almost to the same place. Jake had 2 sisters and a younger brother. They were all great people, and I got along with them right away. Since Jake was in grad school and I was working, I usually visited him on weekends. He rented a house with 2 roommates from his program. We were young, didn't have much money, but we had fun. We went on cheap dates and spent a lot of time at home. Jake bred and sold small animals. It was part of his studies. He was studying animal science, so being surrounded by animals was normal for him, and honestly, I didn't mind it. I met the wife of his academic advisor, Mary. She was around 50 and worked in the university administration. A wonderful woman. We often had lunch together when I visited. In fact, I connected with people from his program even more easily than he did. But about 2 years into the relationship, something strange happened. One day we were lying in bed at his place, partially undressed, and he suddenly said that he was bothered by the fact that I had gained weight, and that it was becoming harder for him to feel attracted to me. Not a word about health,
just that he found me less attractive. I sat up and calmly replied, "Maybe you should make sure I have proper food when I visit you instead of just crackers and cheese." I had gained maybe 4 kilograms since we met. I wore the same clothing size, and even at 23, I wasn't going to tolerate that kind of nonsense. I didn't argue. It was his problem, not mine. So I just asked, "So what's your solution?" He looked me blankly and said, "I think you should try to lose weight." I replied, "No, I'm not going to do that. So what are you going to do?" He said, "Probably nothing. I just wanted to tell you how I feel." "Great, thanks." I got dressed, went to sleep, and left the next day like usual. We kept dating. But about 3 months later, he called and said he wanted to break up after nearly 3 years together. The reason? And I quote, "You're not scientific enough." I thought, what kind of nonsense is that? He seriously claimed that he couldn't talk to me about his work without using scientific animal terminology. I said, "That's ridiculous. What's the real reason?" But he insisted that was the reason. A month later, he came to return my things, and I made him tell the truth. Eventually, he gave in. It turned out he had been seeing one of his students. Let's call her Mac. She was 19. He was 26, and he was her instructor. I exploded. I yelled at him to get out. My roommate even threatened to throw him off the second floor if he didn't leave, and he left. As soon as the door closed behind him, I broke down, from rage to hysterical laughter. I had seen Mac before, and suddenly it all clicked. At a barbecue at his place once, she had spilled something on her pants. Jake asked if I could lend her a pair of sweatpants. I couldn't. I wore a size 44-46, and she was significantly bigger. And suddenly everything made sense. His comment about my weight was never about me. He just wanted me to break up with him because he was a coward. He liked a completely different type of girl, but didn't have the courage to say it. But you know what really got to me? He said it at night, when I was 150 kilometers from home, after we had been intimate. Did he really think I would just snap, turn around, and drive home in the middle of the night? After that, I messaged his roommates. I thanked them for everything and told them we had broken up. And they already knew. They said they had demanded he tell me the truth. Otherwise, they would have told me themselves. That's why he came up with that nonsense about me not being scientific enough. One of the roommates, George, was a very sweet and attractive guy. He offered to bring my things over and said, "Come over this weekend. We'll have some drinks, relax." The kind of thing Jake never wanted to spend money on. I agreed. I came over. Jake wasn't home. George let me in. And that's when things got interesting. I started taking photos of all his animals because I knew one important thing. He had an animal that was on the endangered species list, and you couldn't legally keep it without a permit. All he had to do was file paperwork and pay $25, but he always said, "I don't want the government in my business." I photographed everything, the conditions, the cages, and another animal that was completely illegal to keep in that state. It was right by the window, visible from the street. Then George and I went into town. We got back around midnight, and we made sure Jake and Max saw us. Me in a short dress, a little drunk, George almost carrying me. We were loud on purpose, laughing, joking, even pretending there was something going on between us so they could hear. I spent the night in George's room. He behaved like a gentleman, but a few times walked out into the hallway just in his boxers. Pure coincidence, of course. In the morning, as I was leaving, Jake said, "You don't have to act like a..." I slowly ate a donut in a wrinkled dress with messy hair. George kissed me on the top of my head. Max sat there not knowing where to look. I smiled and said, "Enjoy my leftovers," and left. At the time, I thought that was my revenge. But no, that was just the beginning. The next day, I developed the film. Yes, the good old days, and immediately called the Department of Natural Resources. I reported everything, the animals, the conditions, the overcrowding, and especially the two that were illegal to keep in that state. I simply asked how to properly file a report, and then I did.
I destroyed my ex-boyfriend's life more than 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. As it turned out, Jake wasn't liked, not by his classmates, not even by his own roommates. But me? People liked me. George and another roommate decided to take things further. They filed a complaint with the university about a teaching assistant who was sleeping with his student and giving her preferential treatment. That same night, we went bar hopping. They told the story to everyone they knew. The program was small, and the news spread fast. I made another move, too. I called Mary, his advisor's wife, and I told her directly he admitted himself that he's sleeping with a student. I even had his emails where he confirmed it. I sent them to her. Mary was furious. She immediately passed everything to her husband, Jake's advisor. And then it all started. A couple of weeks later, George calls me, emotional. "They're here, inspectors. They're taking the animals." Mac was at home, and trying to save the situation, she said, "All the animals belong to Jake." That automatically cleared the roommates of responsibility. The inspectors knew exactly where to look. They were tipped off about the back window, where the most problematic animal was, the one that was almost never legal to keep. Since George was on the lease, he had the right to let them in. All the animals were kept in shared spaces. The inspectors worked for several hours. Then they came back with a warrant.
They took all the animals and searched Jake's room. The only thing they left were a few guppies in a tank. Now, the most painful part for him. Graduate students live off grants, and he had just received a federal grant around the time we broke up. I called them and simply asked, how do I report that someone with a federal grant is under investigation for illegal animal possession? The result? He lost the grant and had to pay back nearly $30,000. He will never be able to get federal funding again. He wasn't jailed. The animals were in decent condition, but he lost all his animals, paid about $15,000 in fines. 2 animals were transferred to a wildlife center. The university didn't stay out of it either. He lost his stipend, was fired from teaching, essentially had his academic career destroyed, and all because of one thing. He was sleeping with a student. He couldn't even wait 4 weeks until the end of the course when it would have been technically allowed. His arrogance destroyed him. A few months later, I wrote to his sisters, told them I missed them. They replied and told me he had lied to the family, said I broke up with him because of distance. I just forwarded him his own email where he said he had fallen in love with Mac. And that settled everything. I moved on, finished my studies, built a career. And you know what I do now? I help scientists and doctors explain complex things in simple terms. Ironic, right? And him? He married Mac, 2 kids, went back to breeding animals. 20 years passed, and one day I'm giving a lecture at a university, 250 people in the room. And suddenly I hear, "Hey, long time no see." I turn around. It's him, Jake. I pretended I didn't recognize him. "Sorry, do I know you?" He said, "It's me, Jake." I paused and said, I guess my memory just erased you," and walked away. Later, I found out he was there for a job interview for a teaching position. They were seriously considering hiring him. And then I said just one sentence. "It's strange he's still teaching after what happened at University X." That was enough. They checked and found everything. The scandal with the student, the lost grant, the investigation, the old complaints. And you know what? He didn't get the job. Karma. Sometimes it works perfectly. And my conclusion? If the person who's supposed to love you humiliates you because of your appearance, the problem isn't you. The problem is them.